On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, Nicolas Maduro is in U.S. custody. However, sanctioned tankers have just bolted from ports in Venezuela. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So we've been following the issues down in Venezuela with the pursuit of tankers out in the Atlantic, that is Bella 1, Marinara. However, what we're seeing right now is a mass exodus, at least 16 tankers departing from ports in Venezuela, heading out into the Caribbean, with some actually already in the Atlantic. We're going to discuss this story and what does it mean going forward. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. So this story was broke by the New York Times. Sanctioned oil tankers flee Venezuela in defiance of U.S. blockade. The ships are using deceptive tactics as part of a seemingly coordinated attempt to bypass American naval forces in the region. So this story by Christiaan Triebert and Anatoly Kermenev. I apologize, Anatoly, if I got your name wrong. At least 16 oil tankers hit by U.S. sanctions appear to have made an attempt to evade a major American naval blockade on Venezuela's energy exports over the last 2 days, in part by disguising their true locations or turning off their transmission signals. For weeks, the ships have been spotted on satellite imagery, docked in Venezuelan ports, according to an analysis by the New York Times. But by Saturday, in the wake of President Nicolas Maduro's capture by U.S. forces, all were gone from those locations. Okay, so number one, I know people get all crazy when New York Times reports anything. However, the source for this is impeccable, I would say. This is coming from ground sources, looking at the terminals right now, along with a site that I hold in high regard, and that is Tanker Tracker. So this information is coming out from really good sources. All right, let's go ahead and break this down. So on January 3rd, Tanker Trackers did their update on tankers in and around Venezuela. So as they noted on the 3rd, no tankers were seen loading at the Jose terminal. They had eyes on 86 tankers. And when they say eyes, either through satellite imagery or through visual sightings on the ground. 77 of which are sanctioned violators, 41 under OFAC, that is the Office of Foreign Asset Control of the U.S. State Department, and 36 through non-OFAC. 46 of the violators are laden with crude or fuel oil, one empty tanker believed to have departed 2 weeks ago. And here you can see the breakdown of where those tankers are specifically located. Now, in the press conference the other day, Secretary of State Rubio said that the blockade is one of the largest quarantines in modern history. However, with the withdrawal of American forces out of Venezuela following the snatch operation that grabbed both Nicolas Maduro and his wife, who are now up in New York City, what we're seeing is tankers leaving, at least 16 of them. 4 of those tankers left without authorization from the port or Venezuela's interim government. That is according to internal communications from the state oil company, the PDVSA, and 2 industry experts. Now, these departures could be an early act of defiance against the interim president, Delcy Rodriguez. 4 tankers were specifically identified: the Aquila 2, Bertha, Veronica 3, and Vesna. And here are 3 of them. These were spotted by Tanker Trackers. They were all identified through a Copernicus EU satellite image taken yesterday, leaving Venezuela's main oil port and heading northeast. These tankers are doing everything they can to mask their identity and spoofing their AIS. Now, AIS is the automated identification system that ships have to squawk to identify themselves. I show you this all the time in marine traffic, but I want to show you what these tankers are doing. So these are the marine traffic pages for each of these 4 tankers. So here is Aquila 2, a Panamanian flag crude oil tanker built 22 years ago, 159,000 tons, about 274 meters in length. That's 899 feet. You see right here, the last time this ship pinged was back on January 4th, but it's showing a position in the Baltic. The ship is not in the Baltic. It is actually underway in the Caribbean. Then we have the Bertha. This is a Cook Island flag vessel. Cook Island is a huge, massive red flag when it comes to dark fleet vessels. 305,000 tons. This is a big VLCC, 330 meters in length. This is 1,083 feet. Ship is 22 years old. Again, what you typically tend to see in these dark fleet sanctioned tankers are they're pretty much on the old side, and they're operating in kind of shaky registries. Cook Island definitely fits that characterization. And again, this ship hasn't pinged since December of 23, and it's showing a position off the west coast of Africa. Veronica 3, with a flag in Panama, built 20 years ago, 298,522 tons, similar size, roughly around 330 meters, again, 1,083 feet in length, also showing a position as of December 21st off the west coast of Africa. And then the last one, which is going to be of particular note, this is the Vesna. She is flying a Guyana flag. Guyana has been proven to be a false flag most of the time. Two vessels that we have a long history with in dealing with here, the Skipper and the Marinara, which was the Bella 1, were flying Guyana flags. 106,000 tons, 241 meters. She last pinged way back in November off the coast of China. The ship was caught on the Copernicus EU satellite image about 25 miles west of Grenada. She is empty at this time. She does not appear to be fully loaded, but she is racing out into the Atlantic as we speak. So for weeks, these ships have been identified and tracked while pierside or at anchor off the coast of Venezuela. But now with the capture of Maduro, these ships have either been visually confirmed, the 4 I just showed you, and 12 others aren't located. So this shouldn't have been a surprise to U.S. Southern Command and Special Operations Command off the coast of Venezuela. This, I got to say, about a week ago, before New Year's, I was talking with people about this is a potential to happen. I didn't put it out publicly because I didn't want to give anybody ideas, tell you the truth. So I kind of kept it quiet. We were just doing conversations privately about this. Now, they're using two aspects here. They're using deception by masking their AIS, but they're also trying to use saturation, going out in large numbers. Spoofing, they're also using what are sometimes referred to as zombie signals, where they're picking up old registries of vessels and basically showing themselves as other ships from around the world, or in some cases dead ships, ships that are no longer in existence, hence the term zombies. So you'll see that being done. The tanker Bertha, for example, has been doing that. Now the question becomes, what's the U.S. response to this? Now, as of yesterday, the U.S. Navy's position was just north of Venezuela. Most of the warships, along with part of the amphibious ready group, including the special operations carrier, the Ocean Trader, puts them in a pretty good position to intercept vessels. The problem becomes whether or not the U.S. is going to make the move to grab these vessels or not. These ships are going to require boarding operations. Now, as I said in the last video I did, one of the reasons I think Bella 1 Marinara has quote-unquote escaped was because the U.S. had to prioritize the location of its naval forces. They needed naval forces in the Caribbean. They conducted a strike against Nigeria. They had deployment of forces in the Eastern Mediterranean for anti-ballistic missiles against Iran to protect Israel. I mean, the U.S. Navy, along with the Coast Guard, was stretched pretty thin. Now here you have at least 4, if not 16 vessels that have bolted out of Venezuela. How does the U.S. military handle that? So obviously one of the things that they can use is the amphibious ready group that's in the area. This is the USS Iwo Jima, the San Antonio, and Fort Lauderdale. Now, these ships have the ability to deploy both helicopters in the case of CH-53 Super Stallions and MV-22s. We also believe that these ships, along with potentially the USS Gerald Ford aircraft carrier, may have been used to deploy Army Special Forces and Army helicopters, including those of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. These are the Night Stalkers. One of the things you need to take down tankers, and we talked about this in that previous episode, is you don't just need one helicopter to, fast rope down. You need multiple helicopters. You need a couple of boarding teams to go on board. You need also overflight with control so that if a ship has a weapon of some kind, that can be suppressed from above. So this is, going to tax the ability of the military to do this. Now, the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit is a perfect unit to do this. Matter of fact, I gave a talk a few months ago to the Marine Corps about the use of Marine amphibious units in this role, particularly to create what I called artificial choke points. And because of the nature of the Caribbean, you can actually put these vessels into the areas where ships would transit and potentially use them to board. But remember, it's not just a matter of putting military troops on board the ships. Number one, you need Coast Guard detachments because Coast Guard is law enforcement. The military is not law enforcement. And these ships are under registries of certain countries. Now, we've talked about the idea of them being false flags and stateless vessels. But one of the other big issues that we see happening right now is that some of these ships are doing some things to avoid this. So, for example, the Hyperion, one of the ships that sailed not too long ago, this was a tanker that reflagged itself into the Russian registry. The first one was Marinera. This was the previous Bella 1. Now, we've also seen some deployment of some aviation assets over into Europe, and perhaps these ships will be boarded over there or an attempt to board them. We just don't know at this point, but we're definitely seeing those redeployments. This is going to be a big test right now. Does the U.S. conduct the boarding operations on these vessels? Do they target some and not others, or do they let them go? There is a concern that, Venezuela was producing a lot of oil. They needed to store them. They were filling up the offshore tankers. There was a debate. We are seeing tankers come into Venezuela. There was at least 4 tankers waiting to come into Venezuela that we've identified. Some of these are non-sanctioned tankers. These are Chevron tankers that are operating under a permit to do that. So it's a very confusing picture right now about what's going to happen. The next move here is going to be how U.S. Southern Command and Special Operations Command handles the departure of these tankers. I don't foresee shooting out the engines and rudders of these ships. No one wants to mess with fully loaded oil tankers full of crude oil. Some of these tankers are carrying over 1 million barrels of fuel. Exxon Valdez in 1989 spilled a quarter of that. Nobody wants to create a massive environmental disaster in the Caribbean or in the Atlantic. However, the U.S. is sitting there with a large military force in the area. They're going to need to be able to go out and do this. This highlights for me a couple of really important things the Navy should be looking at. Number one, the utility of those amphibious ready groups. Number two, why the new kind of patrol frigates are really needed, because you need vessels that can go out for long times, long distances with helicopters to conduct these type of maritime boarding operations. Really essential to have vessels like that out there. I also love the utility of a ship like the Ocean Trader I talked about in the previous episode, a converted commercial vessel that allows you to conduct operations where you may not need a Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. This is going to be an interesting situation in how the U.S. deals with this. We heard President Trump the other day give a talk where he talked about how important ocean trade is. Well, here you go. How is the U.S. military prepared to deal with 4 to 16 tankers, and there may be more that eventually sortie out of Venezuela? This is a lot of targets. I don't deny that the U.S. military has the ability to take down a commercial tanker. There's no question about that. The question is, do they have the bandwidth to handle 16 of them sailing at the same time? This is the strategy that they had to be concerned about, and it's going to be a taxing one. They're going to have to respond very quickly and deal with it, because every minute they sail further from Venezuela and they'll get further out away from the coast, creating a bigger problem in hurting them back. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? Well, you hit the super thanks button down below, you give it a big thumbs up, you share it across social media, or head on over to Patreon and become a monthly, yearly subscriber. Really suggest follow Christiaan Triebert over on X, along with Tanker Trackers. They have been doing a great job in monitoring this. Some really good reporting and stories coming out right now. Until the next episode, this is Sal. Sign off.